Chapter 1220. Nasaric Underground Tomb, Underground 9th Floor. In the bedroom, Noah laid on the bed as soon as he came back. He stared at the ceiling as his dark eyes fluctuated with intense emotions. Frankly speaking, Noah was rarely like this. Therefore, if someone who understood Noah saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked, right? In fact, Noah's current mood was indeed quite anxious. That's right. He was anxious. Because of Shesha's matter. Whing. A dazzling white light rose from Noah's body and set off a burst of light particles. They moved back and forth in the air and converged into a human figure. Within the light, Aster's petite figure slowly appeared. Her beautiful silver-white hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Her fair skin looked like pure white ivory under the dazzling white light. Aster slowly opened his eyes amidst the radiance. His mysterious gaze fell on Noah. Looking at those beautiful eyes, Noah even had a feeling that he would be sucked in at any moment. Under such circumstances, the light gradually dissipated. Aster rode on Noah's body and placed her hands on Noah's chest. Her delicate body leaned forward and looked down at Noah, who was lying in front of her. Her tender face didn't have any emotions. From Noah's perspective, Aster was so beautiful that it was tragic. No matter who it was, even if they were women like Aster, they would be moved when they saw such a beautiful Aster. However, Noah wasn't in the mood for that. Aster. Noah looked up at Aster and bitterly smiled. You're not wearing clothes again. Yes. Aster, who appeared from the light, didn't wear any clothes as usual. Her tender but extremely beautiful body was exposed in front of Noah's eyes. Of course, that pair of ivory smooth thighs was still wearing something called knee socks. The sword fairy, who was wearing knee-high socks, maintained her posture of riding on Noah's body. She looked down at Noah from above and her mysterious eyes swayed slightly as she spoke. I think that this attire should be able to make Master happy. Happy? Noah felt a little powerless. It's not the first time I've seen it. Is that so? Aster's tender face moved closer to Noah, to the point where it wouldn't be strange if they kissed. Her flickering eyes were a little moist. In other words, Master is tired of looking at my body. Can you not use such misleading words? Noah felt that his body was becoming weaker, so he simply said so. Aster, who asked you to appear in this attire so often? Why don't you take off your knee socks? Take off my knee socks. Aster's expressionless face turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Moss. Master is really a pervert. It was still the same unfathomable sense of shame as before. However, because of this weakness, Noah was able to use the same trick to deal with Aster when she appeared in this attire in the past. Therefore, Noah continued to use the same trick that had worked so well in the past. If you don't want to take off your knee socks, then you have to obediently put on your clothes. As long as Noah said this, then this elf girl who had an unusual sense of shame about exposing her thighs would obediently put on her clothes, allowing Noah to avoid a lot of stimulation. Unfortunately, this time, Noah was destined to be surprised. Aster's adorable face turned redder and redder, but she didn't put on her clothes due to shyness as Noah expected. Instead, she revealed a determined expression. I understand. Saying this, Aster's trembling hands removed her knee socks under Noah's astonished gaze. In the next moment, a pair of white and smooth thighs were exposed in front of Noah. Until this moment, Aster was completely naked. Aster. Noah was really surprised. The sword elf named Aster's sense of shame was different from ordinary girls. Ordinary girls wouldn't be able to calmly show their naked body in front of the opposite sex. But Aster could do it without batting an eyelid. Ordinary girls would think that showing their thighs would increase their charm. But Aster was abnormally shy about this matter. For Aster, The act of showing her thighs was no different from a young girl showing her naked body in front of the opposite sex. In the past, Aster had never done this before. She only did it once in a fit of pique when she was jealous of Wendy. But this time, in front of Noah, Aster showed her thighs that had always been tightly protected. This was enough to make Noah feel bewildered. Aster, who had removed her knee socks, was still riding on Noah's body. Her white and smooth thighs couldn't help but tremble slightly. Her petite and slender body was curled up into a ball, and her face was flushed red. This way, Master will be happy, right? Obviously, Aster was really shy. Aster. Noah could only stare blankly at Aster. Why? If it was in the past, even if the other party was Noah, Aster would never do this. What was going on? Perhaps because she heard the confusion in Noah's voice, Aster looked straight at Noah. Although her face was flushed due to shyness, Aster still said this sentence. Because Master's mood seems to be very bad, so Aster wants to make Master happy. This sentence made Noah instantly speechless. Master. Aster once again moved her face closer to Noah, as if she wanted to see something from Noah's eyes. She stared straight into Noah's eyes. Are you blaming yourself? This time, Noah was silent. Seeing Noah like this, Aster's eyes flickered as she spoke out Noah's thoughts. Does Master feel that it's entirely his fault that vampire called Satya's mind was controlled? It had to be said that Aster guessed correctly. This was the reason why Noah's mood was so unusually anxious. This was because Noah was the one who ordered the NPCs in the Great Graveyard of Nasarick to capture the Si Lien cult's people. This order caused Satya to be mentally controlled by the Si Lien theocracy, turning her into a marionette. If Noah hadn't underestimated the Si Lien theocracy and thought that he could easily take them down with the power of the NPCs in Nazarick's underground tomb, Satya wouldn't have ended up in such a state. As a result, Noah's order caused Zaisha to become a traitor in the eyes of the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarick. She was an unforgivable target and could not help but become a puppet, falling to such a state. For Satya, this was a very painful thing. After all, the more loyal one was, the more painful it would be to be considered a traitor, right? Noah was even a little afraid. When Satya recovered and found out that she was once a traitor, how painful would it be? Not to mention, in order to let Satya recover, Noah had to fight with the innocent Satya because of his wrong order. Otherwise, he could only allow the NPCs in the great tomb of Nasarick to surround and kill Shadya. How could Noah be in a good mood? Master didn't do anything wrong, Aster said as he looked at Noah. Master didn't know that the 6 great gods of the Si Lien theocracy were players, nor did he know that the Si Lien theocracy had a world-class item. There's no reason to say that it was Master's fault when he gave such an order. You don't have to comfort me, Aster. Noah stretched out his hand and stroked Aster's head with a bitter expression. No matter what, Satya became like that because of my order. It's not too much to say that I caused Satya to be hated by the rest of the people in the tomb. Of course, I also know that now isn't the time to feel guilty. Noah smiled. So, give me a little more time, okay? I understand. Aster pondered for a moment, then said. Then, let me make Master feel better. Chapter 12:21. Make me feel better. Aster's words made Noah more or less stunned. But before Noah could react, Aster, who was riding on Noah, suddenly lowered his body, closed his eyes, and lightly kissed Noah's lips. Chirp. With a soft sound, Aster's delicate lips parted. However, the touch of those soft lips lingered in Noah's heart for a long time. How is it? Aster continued to stare at Noah's eyes, his eyes filled with mystery. Can this make Master feel better? Hearing this, Noah snapped out of his daze and laughed bitterly. Where did you learn this trick? In the guild. Aster said. When Mira and Lisanna treat Master like this, Master's mood will become better. Is that so? Noah suddenly felt a little awkward. How come I don't know? But, Aster knows. Aster looked at Noah expressionlessly. And Aster knows that Master's mood is the best when you mate with Mira and Lisanna. Don't say things like that. Noah was shaken. I say, Aster, don't tell me you've been watching from the side all this time. Watching? Aster tilted his head. Are you referring to the process of master mating with Mira and Lisanna? I told you, don't talk about mating. Noah's voice was a little louder than usual. Tell me the truth, Aster, have you been watching from the side all this time? That's not right, Master. Aster shook his head and looked at Noah. Aster didn't peek, he looked at it openly. The corners of Noah's mouth twitched slightly. If that was the case, then it wasn't wrong. After all, Aster had always been in the form of a dagger and was carried around by Noah. Even when Noah was having fun with Mira and Lisanna, Aster, who had transformed into a small sword, was left to the side. In other words, if Noah really did it under the eyes of this sword spirit girl, it would definitely lead the child astray. And it wasn't just once. Mira and Lisanna definitely can't know about this. If Mira and Lisanna were to find out about it, those two delicate fiancés would probably never allow Noah to hug them again before they got married, right? While Noah was feeling a little ashamed, Aster continued with his shocking words. If it can make Master's mood better, then, Aster will mate with Master too. Noah almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression was one of wonder. It was unknown how Aster understood Noah's expression, but the young sword spirit girl leaned over and kissed Noah's lips once more. Then, like a bird pecking at its food, she repeatedly kissed Noah's lips. In short, although Aster's appearance was young and her figure was immature, it didn't mean that she wasn't charming. Just like in many legends, as an elf, Aster had a stunning appearance that ordinary humans couldn't have. It was enough to make any man, both physically and mentally healthy, howl. Under such circumstances, Aster was still kissing Noah as if she was throwing herself into his arms. She looked like she didn't care even if she was pushed down. It had to be said that even Noah almost lost his mind. Noah, who was afraid of himself, hurriedly pushed away Aster's astonishingly slender shoulder while he was still rational. Then, he opened his mouth without giving Aster a chance to explain. All right, Aster, if this continues, it won't be good. So, let's just leave it like this, okay? Hearing this, Aster's expression did not change at all, but a hint of dissatisfaction appeared in his mysterious eyes. Then, Aster stared at Noah and said, "You're the one who's going to die." Undoubtedly, Master will be very happy if Mira and Lisanna treat Master like this. Can't I? If there was a third person present, upon hearing Aster's words, they would definitely think that Noah was an inhumane scum who abandoned his wife after using her, right? Noah could only cover his face and couldn't say anything. Aster, you're still young, so you can't think about these things, okay? However, this didn't convince Aster at all. I already existed 1,000 years ago. Aster stared at Noah. According to my memories, no matter which world it is, there shouldn't be a human that has existed longer than me. Can't you consider it from the outside? No. Why? Because I'm Master's beloved sword. It's natural for me to become Master's possession. But you're already considered mine, right? Didn't we promise to be together forever? If that's the case, then Master should take everything away from me. Can't you reconsider? No. Why? Because it's very unfair. Noah finally reacted. He almost forgot. What this sword spirit girl hated the most was unfairness and differential treatment. Aster must be jealous of Noah's intimate attitude towards Mira and Lisanna. Please close your eyes, Master. Aster once again moved her tender face towards Noah. Just leave everything to me, Yi Zichin said. Wasn't the person who was supposed to say this line backwards? Seeing Aster close her eyes, pouting her lips, and her cute face getting closer and closer, Noah, who was at the end of his rope, started to give up on himself. Why not just make the best of it? When this choice that meant Noah would lose something important to him forever sprouted in his heart, and when Aster's lips were about to touch Noah's lips once more, even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. Bam! Following a loud sound, Noah's bedroom door was forcefully slammed open. Then, a black aura that caused the entire room to tremble suddenly filled the air. Noah, who was startled, quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the door. There, Yerbade maintained the posture of pushing the door open. Her head was lowered, and the fringe in front of her forehead covered her beautiful face, making it impossible to see her expression. However, the black aura that surged out of Yerbade's body caused a sinister wind to blow through the room, causing Noah's hair to stand on end. Aster, on the other hand, opened her eyes. She first glanced at Yerbade, who was emitting black aura at the door, and then looked back at Noah as if nothing had happened. She reached out and hugged Noah's neck. Master, we've been discovered. That monotonous voice sounded like the greatest provocation to Yerbade's ears. As a result, Yerbade's delicate body began to tremble. The pair of fallen angel wings on her back also began to tremble. The black gas that surged out of her body became even denser. She looked like a ferocious beast that was about to break free from its cage. It made people feel an astonishing ferocious aura. Noah couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Then, Yerbade abruptly raised her head, revealing a face that could make any man drool, right in front of Noah's eyes. However, that beautiful face of hers in the past was now filled with a horrifying expression that would wake up any man who was infatuated with Yerbade's beauty in an instant. Lord Noah. Yerbade walked unsteadily towards Noah like a zombie. Undoubtedly, I can do it any time I want, but you've rejected me time and time again. Now, you're hiding in your room and doing something so enviable with that elf over there. Lord Noah, don't you think this is really unfair? Looking at Yerbade's cursed body, Noah's heart trembled with fear. Calm. Calm down, Yerbade. Anyway, calm down first, okay? Yerbade's beautiful face twisted. How am I supposed to calm down? An astonishing roar reverberated throughout the underground ninth floor of the Nasaric underground tomb. Chapter 1222. After the fight between Aster and Yerbade, although Noah was in an extremely sorry state, it had to be said that his mood had improved a lot. Although he still felt extremely guilty about what had happened to Xiaotaya, Noah wasn't a sloppy person to begin with. He understood that if he blindly blamed himself and felt guilty, it wouldn't change the current situation at all. Therefore, after the fight between Aster and Yerbade, Noah calmed down a little and suppressed his guilt towards Shadia. No matter what, he had to let Shadia return to her original state first. After Xiaotaya recovered, he would compensate her. Thinking of this, Noah calmed down and came out of the bedroom. How is it? In the office, Noah, who was sitting in a black leather chair, looked through the luxurious desk in front of him and cast his gaze on Demiurgo standing in front of him. Did you find an ambush by the Celian theocracy around Shadia? After Satya was mentally controlled, she was thrown to the ground. She didn't receive any orders and stayed there alone. The current Shadia was like a monster that appeared in the wild in a game. As long as someone approached, she would attack. As long as someone attacked, she would counterattack. If one ignored Shadia and went around her, she would also be like a monster that appeared in the wild in a game. She would only stay in one place and would not react. The reason for this situation was that Shadia did not receive the orders of the ruler after being mentally controlled. Previously, Yerbade guessed that the reason why Shadya did not receive the order was that the final counterattack knocked down the ruler. However, it was also possible that the ruler deliberately did not give Shadya an order and let her stay in the wild to lure out her companions. In addition, the main body of the world-class item that caused Shadya to be mentally controlled was still unknown. If one recklessly came into contact with Shadya, it was very likely that it would cause a chain reaction or trigger the triggering condition of the world-class item and trigger the power of mental control again. Due to various considerations, it was definitely not beneficial to come into contact with Shadya before the investigation was clear. In view of this, when Noah returned, he had demiyugos in charge of investigating Zaisha's surroundings. Lord Noah, we have indeed discovered some abnormalities. Demiyugos lowered his head and said respectfully. Although we didn't discover any ambushes from the Celian theocracy in Zatia's surroundings, we discovered that someone was using intelligence magic to monitor Zatia's surroundings. As expected. Noah curled his lips. That's normal. I would be surprised if there was no surveillance. After all, no one knew if the world-class item used on Zatia would have the same effect on people who were too close to her. Therefore, he had to be very careful with his detection. In addition, it is very likely that the other party has obtained some information about the large underground tomb in Nasariq from Zatia. Noah glanced at Demiyugos. Therefore, put the entire large underground tomb in Nasariq on alert. Yes. Demiyugos nodded his head obediently and replied. By the way, Lord Noah, we have arranged spies around Zatia according to your instructions. We have discovered that Yelantil, who is the closest to here, seems to be moving. Yelantil. Noah frowned. What's the matter? I guess the battle between Zatia and the Celian theocracy has attracted Yelantil's attention. Demiyugos said. According to the informant, Yelantil has already sent out adventurers to attack the powerful magical creature that appeared near Khan village. The target of the attack is very likely Zatia. Oh. Noah looked at Demiyugos. Why are you so sure that the other party is planning to attack Zatia? There are two reasons, Demiyugos replied respectfully. First, the scale of the adventurers sent by the other party is very large. In the vicinity, it is impossible that there would be a target that requires such a large team to attack other than Zatia. Second, the other party's route is completely in the direction of Khan village. There is no mistake. A team of adventurers? Noah asked thoughtfully. What kind of scale? All of them are at least silver rank, Demiyugos said. In terms of teams, there are 30 silver rank adventurers teams, 10 gold rank adventurers teams, 5 platinum rank adventurers teams, and 3 secret silver adventurers teams. The total number of people is more than 200. This scale is indeed not used to attack ordinary magical creatures. Noah smacked his lips. Really, one wave after another. After saying that, Noah stood up and glanced in the direction of the corner as he spoke helplessly. He helplessly said, Yerbade, how long are you going to maintain that appearance? Yerbade, who was curled up in the corner like a child with his back facing them, turned his head slightly. His beautiful face was filled with tears. Obviously, Yerbade was still concerned about the matter between Noah and Aster. At that moment, Noah sighed and walked in the direction of the door. Yerbade, if you plan to continue like that, then I won't bring you out. Hearing that, Yerbade jumped up as if he was flying. While flapping the wings on his back, he chased after Noah. Seeing this, Demiyugos hurriedly followed. Chapter 12:23. The warm sunlight shone down from the sky and shone on the seemingly endless plains. The earth seemed to be dyed with a layer of golden color. It was unusually dazzling. At a certain moment, on the edge of such a plain, a group of people riding horses quietly appeared. It was a group of people wearing completely different equipment. Rather than a group of people, it was better to say that it was a group of people forced together by several groups of people to move together. the number of these people was about 200. Moreover, they were basically all men. And these people all had one thing in common. That was, on their necks, they all wore a metal plate. Some wore metal plates made of silver. Some wore metal plates made of gold. There were even some who were wearing precious metal plates made of platinum. Under the sunlight, the metal plates glowed with dazzling colors. In this world, there was only one kind of human who would wear metal plates like this. That was the adventurers. These people riding horses, galloping from the edge of the plain, were all adventurers. Moreover, they were adventurers who were at least silver level and above. In such a group of adventurers who were at least silver level, there were also gold level adventurers, and there were even platinum level adventurers. This was a very rare scene. Because, generally speaking, whether it was a kingdom, an empire, or a theocracy, the adventurers of platinum level and above accounted for about 20% of the adventurers in the country. And in the kingdom, the number of adventurers was about 3,000 people. Based on this ratio, in the kingdom, there were only about 600 adventurers of platinum level and above. In this way, perhaps it did not reflect the preciousness of the adventurers of platinum level and above. But if this data was compared to the population of the kingdom, it was much more obvious. According to estimates, the total population of the kingdom was more than 8 million. Among these 8 million people, there were only 3,000 adventurers, and only 600 adventurers of platinum level and above. If this was the case, then it was understandable, right? That was right. There were so few adventurers of platinum level and above. But in this group of people, there were at least 30 platinum level adventurers. In addition to the rest of the silver level and gold level adventurers, the strength of the group was already to the point that it was not strange to use them in a war. But this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that at the front of this group of people, there were 3 adventure teams wearing even more noble metal plates. It was a metal plate made of mithril. In other words, at the front of this group of people, there were 3 mithril adventure teams that were above platinum level adventurers. Kralgla, Sky Wolf, Rainbow. These 3 teams of mithril adventurers were the strongest adventure teams in Yelantir. However, Yelantir didn't have any mountain copper rank that was higher than mithril rank. As for the highest grade, the fine steel grade, there were only 2 in the entire kingdom. It was even more impossible for Yelantil to have one. Yelantir's adventurers teams, Yelantir's adventure teams, Yelantir of Yelantir's adventure teams, Yelantir, Yelantir. In this way, the leaders of the 3 mithril adventure teams became the leaders of the entire adventure team. They were the 3 strong men who took the lead and charged at the front of the large group. Kralgla's leader, Igvalk. Sky Wolf's leader, Pilati. Rainbow's leader, Moknak. The leaders of the 3 mithril adventure teams showed their leadership at this time. They rode their horses and rode at the front of the large group, leading the large group of adventurers that totaled more than 200 as they galloped on the boundless plains. Rumble. Numerous sounds of horse hooves converged together, forming a rumbling sound that made the earth tremble. Dense smoke and dust rose behind the group of horses as the large adventure team galloped, filling the space of the plains. Looking at the vast momentum, it really gave people a feeling that even if they were fighting on the battlefield, these 200 people would be able to flatten a vast army. It was precisely because this large group of adventurers was so large that some people were puzzled. Such a large group, it should be enough to go against the army of the empire, right? Igvalk smacked his lips. It's just to deal with a mere monster. Is there a need to mobilize such a large group of adventurers? In order to better suppress monsters and prevent humans from being harmed by monsters, almost every city's adventurers guild would regularly organize magic chanters who were proficient in intelligence magic to explore the surrounding areas of the city. From there, they would find the settlements of various monster tribes and the location of powerful monsters. A few days ago, the Adventurers Guild just happened to conduct a survey. As a result, they found that there was an individual with an astonishing magic reaction in this area. That terrifying magic reaction was definitely not at the level that a human could have. And after further investigation, the Adventurers Guild also confirmed. That individual was not a human, but an undead that hated the living. Therefore, the entire Adventurers Guild fell into chaos and an emergency meeting was held. Those who participated in the meeting were not only the Guild Master of the Adventurers Guild, but also the Guild Master of the Mages Guild and the Mayor of the city in Ylantir, as well as the leaders of the 3 most advanced mithril adventure teams in the city. After a round of discussion, the entire upper echelon of Ylantir felt that it was too dangerous to allow the undead with an astonishing magic reaction to continue existing. The undead generally hated the living. If they were allowed to continue existing, perhaps the other party would use its terrifying power to carry out a massacre in the surroundings, to the extent that it would threaten the safety of the entire Ylantir city. In view of this, the Adventurers Guild, the Mages Guild, and the mayor of the city all decided to jointly fund and hire a large number of high-level adventure teams, including 3 mithril adventure teams, to form a large team to crusade against the monster that appeared near Khan village. Igvok had always felt disdain towards this. It's just an undead, not a giant snake monster. Isn't it too much of a fuss to actually mobilize so many people? The undead were basically born from death. Moreover, in the beginning, it was basically impossible for an overly powerful undead to be born. The existence of the undead was actually like a venomous worm. Only in a large number of undead would there be a high possibility of an even more powerful undead being born. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the powerful undead would be surrounded by an extremely large number of low-level undead. There were very few powerful undead that existed individually. Therefore, knowing that the opponent this time was only a single undead, Igvok was so disdainful. It had to be said that Igvok's arrogant speech made the leaders of the other 2 mithril adventure teams very unhappy. Moreover, this was not the first time Igvok had spoken like this. At that moment, Parodi and Moknak, who were also the leaders, looked at each other and said what they had said countless times before. Since the Adventurers Guild and the Mages Guild have already used the intelligence magic to confirm, then there's definitely no mistake. We can't be careless. Otherwise, it wouldn't be strange if we were to die at any time. Igvalki let out a cold snort when he heard Parodi and Moknak's words. I say, no matter what, you guys are the leaders of mithril adventure teams like me. Isn't it too embarrassing to be so afraid of an undead? Such a sentence made Parodi and Moknak furious. However, considering the harmony of the team, the leaders of the 2 mithril adventure teams chose to tolerate it. After all, they were not as arrogant and foolish as Igvok. Let's cut the crap, Parodi said with a straight face. We're almost at our destination. If we continue to complain, it would be too embarrassing for us as adventurers. It's time for the people behind to prepare for battle, Moknak said in a similarly unfriendly tone. Don't be caught off guard by the enemy and cause unnecessary casualties. Igvok turned his head away without saying anything. However, when he turned his head away, Igvok was suddenly startled and exclaimed in surprise. What's that? As soon as he said that, Wang! A huge magic light beam suddenly shot out from the front. Chapter 12:24. Amidst the reverberations of space, a gigantic magical beam that was about 2 meters in diameter abruptly appeared over the boundless plains. It cut through space, rubbing against the air as it streaked straight towards the group of adventurers. The group of adventurers didn't even have time to react before the huge mana beam suddenly shot over and landed on the ground not far in front of Igvalki, Parodi, and Moknak. The sudden appearance of the magical beam didn't directly bombard the ground. Instead, it was like a laser that swept across the ground in front of the group of adventurers. Boom! 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 In an instant, wherever the laser-like magic power beam swept across the ground was blasted apart, setting off astonishing shockwaves and sand. Pieces of gravel shot out in all directions like bullets fired from a gun. The sudden huge commotion caused the horses carrying the adventurers to let out frightened neighs. Without the consent of the riders, they abruptly stopped, straightened their upper bodies, and kicked their powerful front legs in midair. The adventurers riding on the horses all fell down one by one due to the violent movements of the horses in a state of panic and landed heavily on the ground, letting out painful groans. In just a short while, the group of adventurers who were advancing on the plains like a vast army fell into a state of panic. Some of the adventurers were even trampled by the violent horses. If it weren't for the fact that these adventurers were strong and equipped with a certain degree of equipment, they would definitely have been injured under the hooves of the horses. Now, they were considered lucky that they were only in a state of chaos. "Don't panic." Parodi, who also fell from his horse, hurriedly yelled. "Everyone, calm down. Quickly adjust your posture. Prepare for battle." Moknak also yelled. "It's very likely that the enemy has already attacked." From this point of view, Parodi and Moknak were indeed the leaders of the Secret Silver Adventurers team. They were calm in the face of danger and had the mentality to deal with any unexpected situation. Only Igvaki, instead of paying attention to his companions, focused more on the attacker who made a fool of himself. "Who's there?" Igvaki roared furiously at his surroundings. "Who's playing tricks here? Come out." Igvaki's voice turned into an echo that reverberated in the sky above the plains. About 2 to 3 seconds later, a voice that was so cold that it was close to terrifying reverberated in the space in response to Igvaki's words. "How dare you speak to our Supreme Honorable like that? You deserve to die." Along with this sentence, a terrifying evil aura expanded in the entire space. It was a terrifying aura like that of a ferocious ghost that emerged from hell. Bathed in such a terrifying aura, all the adventurers from Erlanter present stiffened. The two waited on both sides of the rock, facing forward. Furthermore, there were 2 other figures standing there. One of them was an old man who was over 50 years old and wore a butler's uniform, but his back was extremely straight. The other had a terrifying appearance. His appearance was like an ant, but also like an insect, and his entire body was covered in the color of ice. These people surrounded the ordinary-looking rock in the middle as if they were protecting something. They expressionlessly looked in the direction of the adventurers. Then, on the rock surrounded by these beings, a person sat on it. It was a young man with black hair and black eyes, wearing pitch-black casual clothes and a white coat. Compared to the existences below the rock, the young man didn't have a terrifying appearance. However, judging from the support of those terrifying existences, the young man sitting at the top was clearly the one who was leading those terrifying existences. Cold sweat began to appear on the foreheads of the adventurers. The people surrounding the rock emitting terrifying existences and evil auras made the adventurers wail in their hearts, and they constantly had the urge to escape. Such fear made Igvaki shout out loud. "You! Who are you people?" Such a sentence made the evil aura of those terrifying existences surge even more intensely. "Mere ants of a lower race." Demiurgos pushed up his glasses and looked up. "Kneel." Just as Demiurgos' voice reverberated in the space of the plains, the adventurers who were at least silver rank and above all felt their hearts tremble, and their bodies involuntarily moved. Accompanied by a series of sounds, the adventurers, including Igvaki, Pilati, and Moknak, who could rival an army, all involuntarily knelt on the ground. It wasn't because these adventurers were so timid that they were frightened by Demiurgos' words. Instead, Demiurgos' words contained a magical power that none of them could resist. "This is..." Moknak's expression changed drastically. "Spiritual attack." "Yes. The reason why the adventurers involuntarily knelt was because Demiyugos had a special ability to make others listen to his orders' domination spell. Looking at the group of adventurers kneeling in unison, Noah, who was sitting on the rock, spoke indifferently. Adventurers, return to where you belong. Chapter 12:25. Adventurers, return to where you belong. When such a sentence was carried by the wind and drilled into the ears of the adventurers who were kneeling on the ground and were unable to get up no matter what, those adventurers were all startled. Noah, on the other hand, ignored those adventurers' startled expressions and continued speaking as if he was talking to himself. I know that you intend to deal with the undying that appeared here, but that undying is my servant, and not someone that you should deal with. Servant. The adventurers led by Igvalki, Parodi, and Moknak revealed shocked expressions. In this world, the meaning of the word servant was not ordinary. Usually, if a human called a magical creature their servant, then under normal circumstances, the servant here referred to the summoned magical creature. Just like the Holy Book of Sunlight of the Sealian cult, the angels summoned by the magic chanters of the faith system who were at least able to use third-grade magic were their servants. Similar situations were not rare. Summoning magic existed in every system of magic. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon goblins. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon ogres. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon lizardmen. Even in legends, there were magic chanters who could use summoning magic to summon the most powerful race, the giant dragon. All kinds of magical creatures could be summoned by magic chanters, and controlled and ordered through corresponding magic. Among them, it naturally included the undying. However, the more powerful the magical creature was, the more advanced the summoning magic would be required to summon it and control it. Now, that human sitting on the rock was saying that the powerful undying that made the entire Yelander's higher-ups tremble, and that they did not hesitate to send out 3 mithril adventurer teams, 5 platinum-ranked adventurer teams, 10 gold-ranked adventurer teams, and 30 silver-ranked adventurer teams, to form a team of more than 200 people, to go on a crusade, was his servant. To be able to summon a magical creature of that level, what kind of magic was that? Thinking of this, all the adventurers trembled. This was because, as previously mentioned, the level of adventurers and the level of magic corresponded. Bronze and iron adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use first-grade magic. Silver and gold adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use second-grade magic. Platinum-ranked and mithril adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use third-grade magic. Platinum-ranked adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use fourth-grade magic. Adventurers of the highest level were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use fifth-grade magic. The strength of the magical creatures summoned by different levels of summoning magic could also be applied to this classification system. First-grade magic could summon magic chanters of bronze or iron level. Second-grade magic could summon of silver or gold-ranked silver to summon silver, or based on this logic, a fourth-grade summoning spell would be able to summon a bronze-grade monster, while a fifth-grade summoning spell would be able to summon a steel-grade monster. Even the Adventurers Guild had no choice but to send out 3 mithril adventurers to lead a crusade against it. No matter how one looked at it, it should be stronger than mithril adventurers, right? And to send out such a large number of adventurers, it couldn't just summon magic of bronze level, right? It was even possible that magic of bronze level was stronger than magic of steel level. Summoning magic that could summon magic of bronze level. Conservatively speaking, it had to be the highest level of magic that humans could control, which was the 6th grade magic of bronze level. This youth who looked to be around 20 years old was a magic chanter who could use 6th grade magic. That's impossible. Igvalki cried out loudly. There is no one who can use 6th grade magic in the kingdom. There is only one in the empire. Do you think I will believe your nonsense? Igvalk's words made the NPCs guarding the Nasaric tomb next to the rock Noah was sitting on focus their gazes on him. Those gazes were filled with an unprecedented murderous aura. Igvok, who was only secret silver level and had not even reached level 20, was targeted by the murderous aura of 6 level 100 NPCs. His vision turned black, and his chest tightened. His blood began to surge. If this continued, Igvok would definitely spit out a mouthful of blood, right? Fortunately, Noah's voice saved Igvok. Whether you believe it or not has nothing to do with me. I am just giving you some advice because I know a few people in the kingdom who are also adventurers. Noah glanced at Igvok. There is a problem with my servant. She no longer obeys my orders. I can't control her for the time being. If you want to come over, I won't stop you. But what happens to you has nothing to do with me. All of the NPCs in Nazarik's underground tomb smiled at the sight of this. It was a smile that was directly linked to cruelty. That smile made all the adventurers feel like they were not far from death. For a moment, they were completely frozen in place, unable to move. The only ones who could remain calm were Paladi and Moknak. The leaders of the two secret silver adventurers looked at each other, then looked at Noah. Parodi carefully asked as if he was offering his respect. Can we ask for your name, sir? Why? Noah looked at Paladi with a faint smile. Since you can't resist, you should at least find out about my background and report back. Paladi's expression froze. Chapter 12:26. On the rock, Noah looked at the group of adventurers riding their horses at a speed faster than when they came, as if they were running for their lives. His expression did not change much from the beginning to the end. Lord Noah, Demiurgo said softly. Forgive me for being blunt, but why didn't Lord Noah kill all those inferior humans? Most of the NPCs in Nazarik's underground tomb nodded in agreement. They had the same idea as Demigos. Because of Zacia's matter, Noah had the people of Nazarik's underground tomb completely seal off the surrounding area. Even though it was just a vast grassland, who knew how many monsters from Nazarik's underground tomb were hiding here? Just now, if Noah hadn't appeared and the human adventurer stepped into this area, the monsters hiding in the dark would have suddenly launched an attack and killed all the adventurers. No one doubted that any of the adventurers would be able to escape. After all, compared to the monsters in the underground tomb, the humans in this world were generally not very strong. Even Good Jifu, who was known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was only level 35. Among the humans, there wasn't even a single magician who could use 7th level spells. How could they fight against the monsters in the underground tomb? In Nazarik's underground tomb, even the monsters that could respawn and appear on their own were only around level 30. With the power of humans, they were no match for most of the magical creatures that could regenerate and appear on their own, not to mention the high-level magical creatures that required money to summon. The monster that had sealed off the area was precisely this type of high-level monster. Among them, the lowest level was level 60, and the highest was level 85. Moreover, there were more than 300 level 60 monsters. Although there weren't that many level 85 monsters, there were still 3 lying in ambush around Satya. In this world, there was almost no one who could break through such a force. It would be very easy for them to kill the human adventurers who weren't even level 20. The NPCs in Nazarik's underground graveyard couldn't understand why Noah would show up and let these people go. In response, Noah did not hide anything and directly spoke his thoughts. I already said that it's just a piece of advice. I'll only do it this once. After saying that, Noah looked at Igvok, who had turned into cold steel, and closed his eyes. If they ignore my words and still want to come, then I won't be merciful. Noah really couldn't stand the indiscriminate killing of the innocent. That was why Noah had specially made a trip to give the adventurers a piece of advice. Now, he had given the advice. If the adventurers didn't intend to listen and still wanted to interfere, then Noah wouldn't be so idle as to put on airs in front of them. To this extent, he had already done his utmost benevolence. Everyone had to be responsible for their own choices. It was just like how Noah had chosen to let the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasaric capture the people of the Celian theocracy alive. In the end, it caused Satya to be mentally dominated and fall to the point where she had no choice but to fight with Satya. Demiurgos. At that moment, Noah asked Demiurgos softly. The defense network should be more or less built, right? Yes. Demiurgos lowered his head and bowed slightly. Whether it's the defensive wall to block intelligence magic or teleportation magic, it has been built. The magic traps and magic tools have also been set up. In addition, the monsters in the underground tomb of Nasaric have sealed the surrounding area. Considering the power of the creatures in this world, we can rest assured that we can act on Satya's matter. Is that so? Noah continued to ask. Then, have you investigated clearly? If you come into contact with Satya, will it trigger the same mental domination power? We haven't investigated clearly yet. Demiurgos seemed to find it difficult to speak, as if blaming himself for not doing a good job. He lowered his head even more. Although we haven't discovered anything yet, we can't rule out the possibility that if we come into contact with Satya, the world-class tool that can control Satya's mind won't be triggered and affect the people who come into contact with her. Is that so? Noah opened his eyes, looked in Satya's direction, and murmured. You still can't be sure. I'm really sorry. Demiurgos bowed deeply. Lord Noah, please give me a little more time. 3 days will be enough. I'll definitely give the Supreme Lord a satisfactory answer. No need, Noah said indifferently. You don't have to interfere with Satya's matter. Let me handle it. Wah. Demiurgos' expression changed. It wasn't just Demiurgos. Even the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric were shocked. Please wait. Yair Bade stepped forward and hurriedly said. That's too dangerous. That's right. Lord Noah. Yauda also hurriedly said. We haven't confirmed whether the same mental domination power will affect the people who come into contact with that idiot Satya, right? That's too dangerous, Malay said timidly. Lord Noah, why don't you reconsider? This subordinate also thinks that it's inappropriate, Seabass said seriously. If Lord Noah is also affected by mental domination, what should we do? There's no reason for the Supreme Lord to personally take the risk, Qasid said in a deep voice. Even if we want to suppress Satya, we should be the ones to do it. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric all voiced their objections. The objections made Noah smile bitterly. I'll tell you the truth, Noah looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric and said. Mental domination is ineffective against me, even if it's the power of a world item. The reason why they were so sure was because Noah had 2 special characteristics. The first was the curse resistance of the God Slayer. It was a foul physique that could repel all mysteries other than those that could affect gods. Unless he could control a god, the mind control used on Satya was ineffective on Noah. Even if the mind domination couldn't nullify the curse resistance of the God Slayer, Noah still had the 3 great constitutions. One of the 3 great constitutions allowed Noah to be immune to any negative effects. The effects on the mind were also in the same category. To be honest, I'm not afraid of the mind domination of a world item, nor am I afraid that the Syrian theocracy will come out of nowhere. I asked you to make so many arrangements because I'm worried that the Syrian theocracy might still be secretly controlling Satya and have to be cut off. Another reason is that I don't want to be disturbed. Noah was silent for a while, then he finally said what was on his mind. In addition, I also need some time to reflect on myself for causing Satya's mind domination. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to wait until now to deal with Satya. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric fell silent. In fact, everyone present knew that Noah didn't make so many arrangements just for the reasons he said. There was another, most important reason, which was for his subordinates. The mind domination that could work on Satya would definitely work on the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek. In order to prevent the others from falling into the same mind domination, Noah had to make so many arrangements to avoid being schemed against by the Syrian theocracy. As for Noah himself, he wasn't afraid of the mind domination or the Syrian theocracy's ambush. If it weren't for the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek, he could have just crushed them and dealt with Satya's matter. After all, even if Noah did not use the demon slayer and the gate of Babylon, he would still be able to reach the maximum level of 100. There was no need for him to worry so much. In other words, it was Nasarek who was holding Noah back. After understanding this, the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek were filled with dark emotions. Not only was he of no use, but he was also a hindrance to the person he was willing to give everything to. He was resentful of himself. Yair Bade couldn't help but say this because of this feeling. Lord Noah, please leave the matter of suppressing Satya to us. No, leave it to me alone. If I show signs of mind domination, I'll kill myself. The eyes of the other NPCs lit up. It was obvious that Yair Bade's suggestion had tempted the others. As for death, it wasn't scary at all for these NPCs. What the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek were really afraid of was not being able to serve Noah and disappointing Noah. Understanding this, Noah couldn't say anything to reprimand him. However, that didn't mean that Noah would agree. Satya was under mind domination because of my orders. Noah looked at everyone present. I want to deal with this matter personally. His unquestionable tone made the NPCs unable to refute. Only then did Noah turn his head and look in a certain direction. Satya was there. Chapter 12:27. Whoosh! A cold breeze blew across the vast plain, causing the clouds in the sky to move with the wind and cover the sun. The ground that was originally illuminated by the sun began to be covered with a layer of shadow. Under such circumstances, the noble princess like Satya was still like a marionette. Her body was hanging down as if she was suspended by an invisible string, without any vitality. At a certain moment, a figure flew over like a meteor and landed on the ground not far from Satya. Looking up at Satya, who was hanging there like a marionette, Noah's emotions fluctuated slightly. The guilt he felt towards Satya had been suppressed deep in his heart. If this guilt were to appear before Satya was restored to her original state, it would not be beneficial for the upcoming battle. Therefore, Noah's current emotions were purely a lament for a beautiful thing turning into a lifeless object. It had to be said that in terms of appearance, although Satya looked very young and was far from being as mature as Yair Bade, she had an unparalleled charm. Such a beautiful girl had now become a lifeless marionette. Anyone would feel that it was a pity. Noah's emotions were more intense than pure pity. After all, the other party was someone Noah knew. She was someone who was still alive and kicking. Of course, Noah understood. As long as he got close to her or launched an attack, that lifeless doll-like girl would instantly turn into a terrifying beast that surpassed any magical creature in this world. Speaking of which, Satya seems to have always wanted me to whip her. Noah bitterly smiled, and then the bitter smile on his face turned into his usual calmness. Although it's not what I want, Satya, I'll satisfy you today. The moment he said that, Noah's pitch-black eyes suddenly turned into a cold silver-white color. An invisible magic power fluctuated. Following the gaze of the pair of ice-cold silver eyes, it was projected onto Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette. Pa-ji. Pa-ji, pa-ji. Accompanied by the sound of ice freezing, Satya's petite body gradually turned into the color of steel and was covered by cold steel. Noah's cold refinement had the ability to change the strength of the effect depending on the enemy's strength and level. If it was a small character like Igvaki who had not even reached level 20, it would take less than 3 seconds to turn him into steel. However, as a level 100 existence, Satya could not compare to Igvaki at all. Therefore, when Noah's cold smelting took effect on Satya's body, even after 3 seconds, it could only temper Satya's ankles. In that instant, a dense evil aura, murderous aura, and bloody aura surged out from Satya's body as she hung there like a marionette. Then, Noah saw it. Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette without a trace of vitality, suddenly raised her head. Yairabel's pretty face also had a wavering expression, but she was not as anxious as Demiurgo's. She stopped Demiurgo's, who was about to leave. That lord won't be in trouble because of an attack of this level. Calm down. But Demiurgo still could not hide the anxiety on his face. Instead, it was Cositas who stared at the scene on the screen and suddenly spoke. Lord Noah isn't injured at all, right? Hearing this, everyone, including Yairabel and Demiurgos, looked at Cositas. Look carefully, said Cositas, with an accent that seemed to be superimposed on each other. Although Zacia's attack frequency is very high, the Pike's ability has not been used even once. After Cositas said this, the other NPCs also noticed this. If Zacia had dealt actual damage to Noah, it was impossible that the pipette pike, that could absorb the damage dealt to the opponent and recover the wielder's stamina and injuries, had not been activated. Even the NPCs in the distant Nasaric underground graveyard noticed this, so it was impossible for Zacia not to have noticed it. Bang! In the midst of the explosion, Zacia once again stabbed with her pike, causing the sandstorm and violent shockwaves to shake in all directions like an avalanche. This caused the ground to crack inch by inch, spreading cracks everywhere. However, Zacia's maniacal laughter had already stopped, and the battle-thirsty smile on her face gradually disappeared. Her scarlet eyes stared at the thick sandstorm close at hand, and her grip on her pike tightened. After a long while, the sand and dust in the air began to settle down, allowing a figure to slowly emerge. Only then did Zacia notice it. The tip of her pike was piercing a crimson gauntlet. Boost! A voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet. Chapter 12:28. Boost! When such a voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet, a warning sign rose in Satya's heart. At Satya's level, intuition, which was similar to a sixth sense, was more trustworthy than what she saw with her eyes. Therefore, the moment an inexplicable warning rose in her heart, Satya did not think twice and directly raised the pike in her hand to block in front of her. The next moment, a bright vortex of air emerged from the fist wrapped in the crimson gauntlet. At the same time, the arm covered by the crimson gauntlet suddenly clenched into a fist and punched heavily at Satya in front of her. Wherever the fist passed, a sonic boom sounded in the space. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Such a punch directly cut through the space and fiercely landed on the pike that Satya had raised in time to block in front of her. Boom! A loud muffled sound that caused people's eardrums to sting and their heads to go blank resounded in the sky above the plains. The astonishing impact turned into a substantial force that surged on the ground like a tide. At the center of the astonishing force, Satya only felt an extremely terrifying force feedback from the pike in her hand, causing her hand holding the pike to go numb. She was sent flying by the unparalleled force. Go! Satya inevitably let out a soft groan. It took her a lot of effort to adjust her body in the air and land on the ground. Even so, the tremendous force acting on Satya's body still caused the vampire's feet to rub against the ground, plowing 2 gullies in the ground. When she came to a stop, the soles of her feet in the gullies emitted a sizzling sound, and light smoke rose from them. Satya's steel-like feet helped her instead, preventing her from feeling the pain caused by the violent friction. But even so, Taya still raised her head with a solemn expression and looked ahead. There, the thick sand and dust that filled the space had been blown away by the impact of the shocking punch just now. Then, Noah's figure appeared in front of Satya without any injuries, just like before. His expression was calm from beginning to end. However, in the hands of the calm Noah, there was a crimson gauntlet that could not be ignored no matter what. It was a gauntlet that looked like a ferocious dragon claw. There was also a jade inlaid on the back of the gauntlet. Boost! The voice came from the Baoyu. As the voice sounded, Satya was also keenly aware of it. The aura on Noah's body suddenly doubled in strength. There was no doubt that it was the power brought by the gauntlet. Upon understanding this, Taya wasn't alarmed. Instead, she laughed. Just like before, she let out a melodious laughter that sounded like silver bells. As expected of Sir Noah, the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasrik. Sure enough, an attack of that level couldn't do anything to you. Satya. Noah stared at the laughing Satya and narrowed his eyes slightly. I see. Although your mind is controlled, you haven't lost your rationality. What are you talking about? Sir Noah. Satya was like a noble princess. She held the spear in one hand and pressed the other to her chest as she spoke with her head raised and chest out. My condition is unprecedentedly good. It's so good that I can't help but want to suck all the blood from Sir Noah's body. After saying that, Satya stuck out her little pink tongue and licked her lips. She looked at Noah with a fervent gaze. If I can taste the blood of a supreme being, there's nothing more blissful than that. Is that so? Noah said indifferently. Then, if I say that I don't mind letting you have a taste, will you obediently listen to me and stand there without moving? Although it's a very charming proposal, that won't do. Satya revealed a bloodthirsty smile. Since Sir Noah attacked me, then no matter what, I have to do my best to kill you. Why? Noah asked in return. Why do you have to do your best to kill me when I attack you? Am I not the master you should be loyal to even if you have to give up your life? Why? The smile on Satya's face froze slightly, and she frowned as though she was confused by her own thoughts. That's right. Why would I fight Sir Noah? Shouldn't Sir Noah be the master I should be loyal to even if I have to give up my life? Why would I do something so disrespectful? After being confused for a while, Satya suddenly smiled. Although I don't know why, since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue, right? You're right, Noah said self-deprecatingly. Since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue. Ahahaha. Taya laughed joyfully. That's right. That's it. The instant she said that, a shocking bloody light suddenly erupted from Satya's body. Within the bloody light, Satya's figure slowly changed. No. It should be said that Satya's clothes slowly changed. The original red and black princess dress suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a set of armor. It was a set of dark red full-body armor that seemed to be dyed in blood and gave off a bone-chilling feeling. The full-body armor tightly wrapped around Satya's body without any gaps. There was only a hole on her face, exposing her face to the air. It looked like a helmet. The helmet was like a swan's head, with bird-like feathers protruding from the left and right sides. There were also winged ornaments hanging from the chest to the shoulders. The lower half of the body was a bright red battle skirt. It wasn't just a piece of equipment, but a set of defensive equipment made up of many pieces of equipment. Moreover, every piece of that set of defensive equipment was at the legendary grade. When combined, they could display power close to the divine artifact level. Now that she was fully geared in legendary equipment, she looked like a bona fide Valkyrie. Her originally noble image had transformed into an extremely dignified one. Chapter 1229. Without using the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon, Noah could match the level 100 Zaisha with his own strength alone. However, that was under the condition that Zaisha did not use any equipment. Now, Zaisha had equipped the Dropper Pike, a divine artifact, and was even wearing legendary equipment. Some of the equipment from Yggdrasil were magical equipment that could display unusual effects and functions, while others did not have such effects. Zaisha's Dropper Pike belonged to the former, while the crimson armor on her body belonged to the latter. However, the equipment from the game had a very common characteristic. That was, it could increase the attributes of the equipment user. In view of this, the strength of the fully armed Zaisha suddenly soared. Clang! Amidst the bell-like sound of metal colliding, the impact of the violent collision not only caused a crack to burst open on the ground, but it also forced both Noah and Zaisha back. However, Zaisha was forced back several steps. On the other hand, Noah only took half a step back before stabilizing his body. Although Zaisha's strength had soared after being fully armed, Noah's strength had also soared by several times under the effect of the boosted gear. In the end, Noah still had the upper hand. It's not over yet. Zaisha suddenly stepped forward while retreating, and her body once again shot out like a sharp arrow. She swung the huge pike in her hand, and with a burst of extremely oppressive wind, she repeatedly stabbed at Noah's body. His field of vision was covered by dazzling spear shadows. Noah's eyes hardened as he withdrew his feet. While he was still retreating in midair, his arm, which was covered by the ferocious crimson hand armor, was waved and violently deflected the many spear shadows that were thrusting towards him. Clang, 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 clang. On the vast plain, the crisp sound of metal clashing echoed in the air, lingering for a long time. What's wrong with you, Lord Noah? Why aren't you fighting back? Ahahaha. Shadia, who was in a position where she was constantly attacking, repeatedly thrust the Dropper Pike in her hand in a violent manner while staring at Noah, who had a calm expression on his face as he deflected the incoming attacks one by one. She laughed provocatively. What about the overwhelming power you displayed when you faced all of us guardians alone in the throne room? Could it all be fake? Noah ignored Satya's provocation and only flicked away the spear that was thrusting at him. His expression didn't even change. Looking at the calm Noah, Satya became impatient. If that's the case, then let me kill you. After saying that, Zaisha suddenly stopped and extended her hand towards Noah. Whing! Amidst the trembling of space, 3 ring-shaped magic arrays suddenly overlapped and revolved in front of Satya's palm. Magic Enhancement Crimson Nova. A circle of crimson flames rose from the center of the magic array. The crimson flames began to expand like ripples. Then, in the space around Noah, who was retreating, the same flames suddenly appeared. It instantly enveloped Noah's entire body and exploded. Bang! Amidst the explosion, Noah's entire body was engulfed in raging flames, and he was roasted by the scorching flames. However, Satya's eyes suddenly widened. There was no other reason. It was because in the flames, whose temperature was comparable to the magma of an erupting volcano, Noah seemed to be unaffected. His body carried traces of heat from the flames as he slowly raised his foot and stomped down. With a bang, Noah's figure shot out of the scorching flames and approached Satya in a breath. Satya's expression changed and her pupils shrank. She didn't have time to consider why her magic was ineffective against Noah. She hurriedly raised the pipette pike and fiercely swung it at the figure shooting over. Noah, who had turned into a lightning-like black shadow, seemed to have sensed the ferocious energy coming toward him. His body instantly moved horizontally, and with a spin, he appeared behind Satya as if he was performing an elegant dance. In the next second, Noah's body spun slightly, and he clenched his fists that were covered in crimson gloves. The powerful force caused a gust of wind to swirl around, and as Noah's fist swung out, it formed a sonic boom that blasted toward Zaisha's back. Sensing the terrifying energy coming from behind, Xiaotaya's expression changed again and again as she screamed. Impure impact shield. Blood-like crimson energy ripples suddenly spread out from Xiaotaya's body and turned into a barrier that protected Xiaotaya inside. Bang! With a muffled boom, Noah's terrifying punch smashed into the energy barrier. The resulting shockwave turned into waves of wind that spread out in all directions. Immediately after, a cracking sound rang out from the energy barrier. It was the sound of the energy barrier protecting Xiaotaya inside cracking. What? Xiaotaya was shocked. My impure impact shield actually cracked. On the other side, Noah's brows furrowed slightly. It didn't shatter. Muttering those words, Noah's figure once again spun around. Relying on his LV-4 and SSS rank, agility, and dexterity, he was like a phantom that constantly flashed around Xiaotaya's body. While he was dodging, Noah's fists, which contained a terrifying strength chi, continuously blasted out, one after another, hitting the impure impact shield that protected Xiaotaya. Under Noah's almost non-stop attack, a series of muffled bang-bang-bang sounds continuously shook the energy barrier around Xiaotaya without any interruption. Every time a muffled sound shook, the energy barrier around Xiaotaya would crack with a crack sound. Under such circumstances, Xiaotaya really didn't dare to believe it. Chapter 1230. Bang! Amidst the deafening explosion, a violent shockwave erupted from the cracked energy barrier around Satya. The shockwave swept away the dust on the ground, breaking it inch by inch. Bang! Without any suspense, Noah's punch, which had been amplified 4 times by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, caused the blood-like energy barrier to shatter like glass. It shattered into pieces and scattered in all directions. Then, Noah's body turned, and his legs suddenly flew out, landing heavily on Zaisha's body. Dong! The terrifying power sent Satya flying like a rubber ball. She rubbed against the air and heavily slammed into the ground in the distance. She smashed through the rock layer and stirred up a dense cloud of dust. The ground looked like it had been hit by a meteorite, and a crater appeared. Puchi! In the crater, Satya spat out a mouthful of blood. The crimson full-body armor on her body cracked open. Everyone suddenly fell silent. In front, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Satya, who was deep in the crater. He watched as blood seeped out of the corners of her mouth. His eyes flickered slightly as he sighed. Give up, Satya. You're no match for me. Although Noah's words did not contain much confidence, it was precisely because they did not contain any emotion that they gave off the most realistic feeling. Cough, cough, cough. Satya covered her chest and coughed as she slowly stood up from the crater with difficulty. She looked at Noah and revealed a coquettish smile. That's true. You're indeed worthy of being the supreme and invincible sovereign that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for. You're the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasrik. With such power, you're the absolute overlord of this world. Provoking you is more foolish than provoking a dragon. While saying that, Satya did not have any intention of giving up. Instead, the bloodthirst on her face became even stronger. Undoubtedly, I know this clearly. Why do I feel that I can't give up the battle with you? Why do I feel that I have to kill you? I really don't understand. Is that so? Noah closed his eyes. In other words, you don't intend to surrender. Of course. Satya pointed the pike in her hand at Noah and laughed coquettishly. I've been looking forward to Sir Noah being able to love me. I finally got this opportunity, so how can I give it up? Hearing that, Noah was silent for a while. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at Satya with determination. If that's the case, then let me pull down the curtain of this boring battle. After saying that, Noah raised the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Boost, multiplication. The voice that represented the activation of the fifth, multiplication ability, echoed from the jade of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. The limit of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which was created by Noah's weapon refinement, was 5 boosts. Therefore, from the beginning of the battle until now, 50 seconds had passed, and the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was finally able to display its greatest power. The reason why Noah had not used the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon was because he was waiting for this moment. Thus, Noah chanted a contract in the Elven language. Cold Queen of Steel, the holy sword that slays demons. Noah pulled out the silver dagger from his back and placed it in his right hand, equipped with the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. A dazzling white light burst out from the silver dagger. Amidst the light, the highest grade elven equipment named Demon Slayer appeared in its complete form. It turned into a shining silver holy sword and was held tightly by a ferocious red dragon-shaped gauntlet. That's... Zacia's pupils shrank. Aster. Zacia was not familiar with the elven girl named Aster, but she was not a stranger either. She was not familiar with Aster because ever since she flew out of Noah's bed in the form of a sword and fought with the Guardians, Zacia had never seen Aster again. She was not unfamiliar because of jealousy. She was jealous that Aster could become Noah's weapon. Not only Zacia, but even Yair was extremely jealous of Aster. For Yair and Zacia, who had special feelings for Noah, just the title of becoming Noah's weapon was enough to arouse their jealousy. Not to mention, because Aster was a weapon, she was carried by Noah at all times. They even slept together, which made Yair and Zacia jealous for a while. If they could be like Aster and transform into a weapon and be used by Lord Noah, it would be too fortunate. This was the truest thought of Yair and Zacia after knowing of Aster's existence. Therefore, although Zacia had only seen Aster once, she had never forgotten the existence of this elven girl. Of course, there was another reason why she had such a deep impression. That was, back then, Aster had fought with all the Guardians in the form of a sword and was not at a disadvantage. At that time, all the Guardians were not wearing any equipment, and because the battlefield was in Noah's room, they did not even use their true strength. However, being able to fight against 6 Guardians was enough to prove Aster's strength. She was definitely not weaker than a world-class weapon. This fact made Zacia extremely vigilant. Unfortunately, Noah had been holding back and not using the Demon Slayer, not only because he wanted to let it display the power of a world-class weapon. Transfer. Following this voice, the power of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which had been multiplied 5 times, was all transferred to the Demon Slayer. Immediately, the holy sword that had annihilated the Demon King trembled and released an astonishing light. That light illuminated the entire world. Chapter 1231. Shadia, who was clad in a crimson armor, was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer. She wailed in agony as though she had been struck by lightning. She looked as though she had also been purified by the Demon Slayer. Wisps of black aura emanated from her body. Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer tightly, maintained the posture of piercing through Satya's chest with the elven device in his hand. He looked up at Satya, who was crying out in pain in the white light as though she had been struck by lightning. He gritted his teeth, and the divine power in his body intensified as he poured it into the silver holy sword in his hand. Clang! After the Demon Slayer was strengthened by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear 5 times in a row, in addition to the massive amount of divine power, the white radiance emanating from it was so dazzling that it burned one's eyes. Under this situation, Shadia, who was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer, as though she had been struck by lightning, released wisps of black aura from her body, and her wails became even more intense. From a distance, it was as though a white sun had appeared on the vast plain, dazzling and resplendent. The dazzling white radiance gushed out like a tide and enveloped the entire space. At that moment, the monsters that were lying in ambush in the plain and sealed off Shadia's surroundings in accordance with Noah's orders were drowned by the dazzling white radiance. These demonic creatures also involuntarily appeared from the darkness and let out beast-like cries. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the demon slayer had a curse resistance that could break all curses. It was simply the natural enemy of these monsters who had negative energy that was completely opposite to their life force. Even Demon King Solomon, who had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and was devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King, couldn't resist the power of the Demon Slayer, let alone these monsters. What's more, the power of the Demon Slayer had increased fivefold from the beginning to the end. Fortunately, at that moment, the power of the Demon Slayer wasn't directed at these monsters in the underground tomb of Nazareth. Otherwise, all the monsters here, including the few level 85 monsters, would have been cleansed by the power of the Demon Slayer, leaving nothing behind. As a result, amidst all kinds of bestial roars, the dazzling white radiance that enveloped the entire space finally stopped expanding. After an unknown amount of time, the white radiance that enveloped the entire vast plain gradually dimmed. Immediately, the monsters whose negative energy was surging due to the power of the Demon Slayer, looked at the center of the dim white radiance with lingering fear. There, Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer, was still in the posture of piercing the silver holy sword into Satya's body. His head was lowered, and the bangs on his forehead covered his expression. On the other hand, Zaisha also lowered her head and returned to her marionette-like state. With a trembling sound, the huge thorny spear in Satya's hand and the crimson full-body armor on her body seemed to have turned into a mirage and disappeared in a flash. Bang! On Noah's right hand that was holding the Demon Slayer, the Longinus, which was called the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, also shattered into pieces like glass and disappeared with a shattering sound. Ugh! Satya let out a muffled groan. Her delicate body softened, and she slowly fell down. It was not until this moment that Noah finally made a move. After pulling the Demon Slayer out of Satya's body, Noah hugged Satya, who had collapsed on him, and knelt on one knee on the ground. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Ugh! After an unknown period of time, Satya let out a groan and slowly opened her scarlet eyes. Noah, who was holding Satya in his arms, immediately looked into her eyes. At this moment, there was no longer the emptiness in her eyes, nor was there the madness from before. There was only endless exhaustion. Awe! Satya also opened her eyes and met Noah's gaze. She was stunned on the spot. Sir! Noah! Upon hearing the familiar voice, Noah secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "What's the matter? How do you feel?" "How do I feel?" Satya seemed to be a little confused for a moment, and she seemed to be unable to grasp the situation. She just opened her tired eyes and spoke weakly. "I feel so tired. For an undying, this was absolutely an incredible thing. Because the undying didn't feel fatigue and didn't need to eat or drink. As the true ancestor of vampires, who was at the top of the undying, it was really inconceivable that Satya would feel tired. Of course, if it was mental fatigue, it would be a different story. However, looking at Satya's powerless appearance, it was clear that this vampire girl wasn't just mentally exhausted. She was definitely physically exhausted as well. However, this was not strange at all. As an undying, Satya's body was also full of negative energy, which was the opposite of life force. Under the direct attack of the Demon Slayer, the negative energy in Satya's body was purified to the extreme, which caused Satya to feel extremely tired like ordinary people. However, Satya's mental control was also lifted. Therefore, Satya looked at Noah blankly. "Why am I here? Why is Sir Noah here?" You don't need to think about anything. Have a good rest first. Noah stroked Satya's silver gray hair. When you wake up, you'll understand everything. If it were in the past, as the guardian of Nazarik's underground tomb, Zaisha wouldn't have fallen asleep in front of the person she had given everything she had to serve. Chapter 1232. As mentioned earlier, the underground tomb of Nasarik was mainly divided into 10 floors, and all of them were located underground. On the ground, the underground tomb of Nasarik was an extremely vast graveyard. The graveyard was surrounded by a huge wall that was 6 meters thick. The wall was circular. There was an entrance at the front and back of the wall. Inside the wall, the huge graveyard seemed to have sunk into the earth, and it looked like a basin. In the graveyard, in addition to neatly trimmed weeds and many messy tombstones, there were also dense trees. The scene that seemed to form a forest complemented the surrounding neatly trimmed weeds and messy tombstones, creating a strong sense of contrast. Not only that, but there were also exquisite carvings of angels and goddesses everywhere in the graveyard. The carvings of angels and goddesses were extremely exquisite and breathtaking. Moreover, it could be seen at a glance that someone was carrying out regular maintenance. In contrast, the towering trees in the graveyard were crooked and drooped, brewing a gloomy atmosphere. Then, in the graveyard, there was an ancestral hall in each of the 4 corners of the graveyard. Surrounded by the 4 ancestral halls, there was an extremely large ancestral hall in the center of the graveyard. This large ancestral hall was the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarik. Noah, who was carrying Satya, slowly descended from the air with the help of a magic tool with the power of flight, and landed in this strange graveyard. Whoosh! Almost immediately, monsters of different shapes and sizes flashed out from the shadows around the graveyard, their bodies surging with an evil aura. These monsters were at least level 50 and above. Therefore, once an outsider stepped into the graveyard, these monsters of at least level 50 and above would instantly appear and take down any outsider. However, when they saw the full appearance of the newcomer, the demonic creatures that were surging with evil aura all paused for a moment. Then, they knelt or prostrated themselves in unison, offering Noah their vassal. Noah ignored the monsters around him. He only carried the sleeping Satya and walked towards the central ancestral hall. When Noah walked out of sight, the monsters of at least level 50 and above seemed to have merged into the surrounding shadows and disappeared, continuing to guard the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarik. Not long after, Noah, who was carrying Satya, stepped onto the steps of the ancestral hall. Lord Noah. At the entrance of the ancestral hall, Yacht, Mare, Cosette, Demiurgos, Sebastian, and a group of combat maids were all present. They bowed in the direction of Noah. Welcome back. Noah nodded casually and then looked at Beta. Although judging from the situation, Satya should be fine, let me confirm it for the time being. Yes, Lord Noah, Yacht reported as he stepped forward and lowered his head. I have just confirmed the list of NPCs in the throne room's management system. Satya's name has indeed returned to its original white color. It is no longer red-black, which was hostile when she was in the state of mind. Based on this, Satya's problem should be resolved. That's good. Noah's expression softened slightly. That is true, but it is also true that Satya was hostile to the Supreme One. Bade looked at Noah, and his eyes, which were glowing with golden light, flickered slightly. Lord Noah, shouldn't we punish Satya? Noah furrowed his brows when he heard Bade's words. He raised his head and looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarik. Only then did Noah notice that these NPCs who were loyal to him seemed to have changed. The change here wasn't in their appearance, but in their atmosphere. In the past, when these NPCs faced Noah, they would have an atmosphere of respect and worship. Now, not only did the reverence and worship become even more intense, there was also a trace of a different feeling mixed in. It was a feeling that came after they gained tenacious determination and strong willpower. It seemed that during the battle between Noah and Satya, these NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarick had gained some benefits. Please forgive me for interfering with Lord Noah's decision. Under Noah's gaze, Yach said so. For a force, the distinction between reward and punishment is the most important issue. It is also common sense in the world. Even if Satya was disrespectful to Lord Noah involuntarily, a mistake is a mistake. If there is no punishment, the subordinates won't take it as a warning. Who knows, when the same thing happens again, the others will use this as an excuse to weaken their willpower. The success rate of mind domination was also related to the strength of an individual's willpower. If one's willpower was strong, then even if they were under mind domination, they would be able to resist it. Take Satya for example. Even when her mind was under control, she could still rely on her tenacious willpower to resist and counterattack the caster. This resulted in the enemy being unable to give orders to Satya and could only make the helpless decision of abandoning her. Knowing that they will be punished for making such a mistake, even if they are under mind domination, in order to not be punished, everyone will resist so that the situation won't become too unfavorable, Demiurgos continued Yach's words. As such, this subordinate also believes that Lord Noah should give Satya an appropriate punishment as a warning. It's not just this incident, Sebas said in a deep voice. In the future, no matter what happens that will implicate the Supreme Sovereign, we hope that Lord Noah can give us the harshest punishment. Immediately, Yach, Mer, Cosidis, and the other NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarick all nodded. Chapter 1233. On the day that the battle between Noah and Zaisha ended, a small change was also taking place in Elantir. Recalling the huge commotion that he had heard when he sneaked into Elantir, a person wearing a black robe whose figure seemed to have blended into the moonlight slightly lifted his face that was covered by the hood of the black robe. He opened his mouth and revealed a crazy and sinister smile. Seems like that side is more interesting, these words rang out softly from under the hoodie. From the voice, it was easy to recognize that the other party was a woman. The woman in the black robe was immersed in her own world. No one knew what she thought of, but she kept laughing creepily as she walked forward. Upon closer inspection, the place where the black-robed person was actually a huge cemetery. This graveyard belonged to Elantir. Moreover, it was a huge cemetery with an outer city wall that occupied almost half of the western area of Elantir. Presumably, even compared to the other countries, the scale of this cemetery was very large, right? This was a scale that appeared to suppress the birth of the undead. The undead were a race that was born from death. Therefore, as long as there was a place where the living were dying, it was possible for the undead to be born. According to research, people had discovered that the probability of the dead who died an unnatural death or had no one to mourn was quite high. Therefore, in places like battlefields and ruins, the undead would often appear. Elantir's location bordered the borders of the kingdom, empire, and theocracy. Not to mention the theocracy for the time being, because the kingdom and empire were at war all year round, this city that bordered the borders of the two countries was extremely special. For example, the battlefield where the kingdom and empire fought was very close to Elantir. The soldiers who died on the battlefield, regardless of the number or cause of death, were enough to give birth to a large number of undead. In view of this, in order to prevent the dead from becoming undead, a cemetery that people could mourn became rather important. This was the reason why Elantilai's cemetery was built so large. Of course, even if this was the case, undying beings would often be born here. It was one of the places that no one was willing to visit. Under such circumstances, the black-robed man walked unscrupulously in the cemetery. Soon, he arrived in front of an ancestral hall and removed the hood on his head. What appeared under the hood was the pretty face of a young girl in her prime. The girl's facial features were regular, and her appearance could be considered cute. However, on that cute face hung a dangerous smile like that of a carnivorous beast. With such a smile, the girl pushed open the stone door of the ancestral hall with light steps. She entered the ancestral hall and came to the stone pedestal where the corpse was placed. The young girl walked up to the stone pedestal and pressed down on a small, inconspicuous carving at the bottom of the stone pedestal with a relaxed movement that didn't make one think that she would appear in a graveyard or an ancestral hall. Kacha, the sculpture sank as the girl moved. Immediately afterward, the stone seat trembled and slowly opened like a door, revealing a flight of stairs leading to the underground in front of the young girl. Hee, the girl giggled as if she found it interesting. Moreover, she didn't hesitate to walk down the gloomy underground stairs that would make ordinary girls shrink back. She arrived at an extremely vast empty space. The walls and floor were made of artificially treated earth. It was unknown if there was wind, but the air was quite fresh. However, inside the empty space, there was a strange carpet hanging on the wall. Moreover, there was a candlestick that seemed to be dyed red with blood. The candles inside were lit and emitted a faint flame. The swaying candlelight made the girl's shadow stretch on the walls and floor. The girl walked with clear steps and arrived at the bottom of the empty space. Looking around, the girl's gaze stopped at a place after a while. Her giggling voice echoed in the surroundings without any concealment. Tisk, the girl's unpleasant giggling attracted a speechless sound that contained displeasure. That was the sound of someone being easily discovered. Moreover, it was the sound of someone being easily discovered by someone they hated. Under such a speechless sound, a thin man slowly walked out from the shadows where the girl was looking. It was a man with sunken eyes and no hair. It was impossible to determine his age. He wore a long robe and wore a necklace made of small animal skulls around his neck. His body was so thin that only skin and bones were left. He also held a black staff. Rather than calling him a human, it would be better to call him a skinny skeleton. Hi. The girl warmly greeted the skeleton man. I'm here to see you, little Kaji. My name is Kajit, not little Kaji. The skeleton man who called himself Kajit said with an unpleasant voice. Celian Theocracy Special Intelligence Unit, Dark Scriptures Clementine. What are you doing here? I'm no longer a member of the Dark Scripture. The girl named Clementine said with a frivolous tone. I'm here to tell you a piece of good news, little Kaji. A piece of good news that will be of great help to your goal. Hearing this, Kajit narrowed his eyes. Kajit was a magic chanter that specialized in the study of the undead. That was why Kajit stayed in this kind of place. Of course, the reason why Kajit stayed here wasn't as simple as just researching the undying. He wanted to create an undying that wouldn't tire, didn't need to eat or drink, and had an immortal life. Usually, in places where the undead gathered, there would be powerful undead. If there were powerful undead gathered, then there would be even more powerful undead. Using this characteristic, in theory, as long as there were enough undead, then in the end, there would definitely be a terrifying undead king that was strong enough to make all the races in the world despair. Kajit's goal was to turn Ylantir into a ghost town. By collecting the negative energy in the ghost town, he could create a large number of undead, and even make himself an undead existence. The girl named Clementine clearly knew Kajit's goal. That was why she said that. Did you know? Clementine giggled. It said that recently, the Adventurers Guild discovered a super powerful undying being and sent out 3 teams of secret silver-ranked adventurers as leaders. A total of more than 200 Adventurers Guild members went on a crusade against the undying being. In the end, those people ran back scared witless today, causing Ylantir to almost fall into chaos. Hearing this, Kajit's eyes flashed as he stared closely at Clementine. Is what you said true? It's true, it's true. Of course it's true. Clementine said with a tone that made people feel like she was joking. Also, it said that the super powerful undead seems to be a servant that someone summoned with summoning magic. Oh? Kadjit asked with interest. Then what rank of undead summoning magic did that person use? 3rd rank. Or 4th rank? Little Kadjit, you've become stupid. The smile on Clementine's face gradually became uninteresting as she said exaggeratedly. That's a magic chanter that could force back more than 200 adventurers led by 3 teams of mithril rank adventurers. Just his servant alone made the Adventurers Guild feel like they're facing a great enemy. It even turned the leader of one of the mithril rank adventurers into a steel statue in an instant. How could it only be a 3rd or 4th rank trash? The corners of Kadjit's eyes twitched slightly. There was no other reason. The highest rank of undead summoning magic that Kadjit used was only a 3rd rank magic. Hey, little Kadjit, don't you want to meet that person? Clementine invited as if she had good intentions. Perhaps you can obtain the secret to summoning such a powerful undead from him. It's very likely that he's like you, only able to use low-rank summoning magic, but can use precious magical tools to increase the power of his summoning magic. Perhaps that's how he can summon such a powerful undead. What she meant was for Kadjit to snatch it from him. Is that so? Kadjit rolled his eyes and sneered at Clementine. But, what's in it for you? Do you even need to ask? Clementine smiled cheerfully. Of course it's interesting. Chapter 1234. If someone thought that the underground tomb of Nassarik was gloomy because it was underground, then they were completely wrong. Indeed, in the great catacombs beneath Nassarik, there were dark places. After all, the underground tomb of Nassarik was made up of 10 underground spaces. Among them, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors of the underground tomb of Nassarik were in the form of tombs. The 4th floor was an underground lake. The 5th floor was an ice river. The 6th floor was a jungle. The 7th floor was magma. The 8th floor was a wilderness. To say that the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nassarik were gloomy was to underestimate the stronghold of a powerful guild that could do anything in the game. However, this was only true for the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nassarik. The 9th floor of the Nassarik catacombs was as solemn and sacred as a chalk castle. Every room was a standard royal suite. It couldn't be any more luxurious. Compared to the first 8 floors, it was like a place of heaven. Naturally, such a place wouldn't be gloomy. The rainbow-colored crystal lamp hanging from the ceiling emitted light that was extremely gentle and beautiful. That was the light from a magic tool called perpetual light. Just like the name of the magic item, as long as there was enough magic, this light would never be extinguished. With such a magic item as a light source, even if the 9th floor of the underground tomb of Nassarik wanted to be gloomy, it wouldn't be gloomy. It was likely that anyone walking in the hallway would be moved by the beauty of this place. This was especially true for the people in the great underground tomb of Nassarik. There was no one who would not be moved when they walked on this floor that was originally occupied by the creators. Therefore, for the people in the underground tomb of Nassarik who were willing to give up everything to be loyal to the Supreme Sovereign, all the scenes and decorations here were worth loving. Every time they walked on this floor, everyone in the underground tomb of Nassarik would feel happy and reaffirm their loyalty to the creators. If someone didn't like the scenery here, then they weren't loyal enough to the Supreme Sovereign, or they had disloyal thoughts. That was the unanimous thought of everyone in the great tomb under Nassarik. Even Xiaotaya thought the same. However, this time, Zaisha did not feel happy at all. Instead, she felt unusually heavy. It wasn't just her mood. Even her footsteps were unbelievably heavy. Her beautiful face was filled with gloom. There was even a faint trace of despair on her face. What should I do? When Xiaotaya woke up from her dream and recalled everything that had happened, she almost fainted. This was because Xiaotaya remembered the person she was loyal to even if it cost her life. She swung her weapon. Why is it like this? Xiaotaya covered her face and was on the verge of crying. That must be a dream, right? After waking up from her sleep, Xiaotaya had told herself this more than once. There was no other way. Even Zatia herself did not want to believe that she had actually pointed her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to. That was tantamount to betrayal. No. In fact, that was betrayal. Even though Xiaotaya was under mental control at that time, it was just like what Yerbade said. A mistake was a mistake, and a betrayal was a betrayal. Even if she had no choice, it was the truth. Xiaotaya could not forgive herself for that. It wasn't just because Noah was the person Satya had to pledge her loyalty to, it was also because Noah was the person Satya loved. Of course, there was something wrong with this love. In the game era, Xiaotaya's creator had set her up as a person with all kinds of inexplicable hobbies. Asexual. Sadist. Masochist. Necrophilia. All kinds of special fetishes that ordinary people wouldn't dare to compliment were gathered in Xiaotaya's body. When they first met, Noah used overwhelming strength to send all the guardians flying. When he used this as a test, it accidentally aroused the masochistic part of the vampire girl's heart. Since then, Xiaotaya had fallen madly in love with Noah. In this way, who could say that this kind of love was right? But there was no doubt that Xiaotaya did have special feelings for Noah. Waving her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to even if she had to die. Becoming an enemy of the person she loved the most. Under the double blow, the guilt in Xiaotaya's heart was even stronger than Yerbade and Demiurgos had imagined. Boo-hoo. Xiaotaya covered her face, and her voice sounded like she was about to cry. How good would it be if I could atone for my sins with death? For the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasaric, death was definitely the easiest way to atone for their sins. This was because they had long decided to dedicate their lives to the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasaric. If possible, Xiaotaya really wanted to commit suicide now and end everything. However, Noah had ordered Xiaotaya to see him immediately after she woke up. Between death and orders, Xiaotaya chose the latter without hesitation. It was not that Xiaotaya was afraid of death. Instead, compared to death, Noah's orders were truly important. If she died under Noah's orders, she would be disobeying Noah's orders. Xiaotaya had already betrayed Noah once, so how could she disobey Noah's orders again? Therefore, no matter how heavy her footsteps were, Xiaotaya could only choose to continue. In fact, to Xiaotaya, it didn't matter if she was reprimanded by Noah. Taking her life or committing suicide to atone for her sins wasn't a problem at all. What Xiaotaya was truly afraid of was seeing Noah's disappointed expression. What should she do if she was abandoned by the supreme ruler she had to be loyal to even if she had to give up her life? How terrifying would it be if she disappointed her master? If Noah no longer trusted Xiaotaya because of this, it would definitely be countless times more painful than death for her. If that happens, I won't be forgiven even if I lose my life, Xiaotaya couldn't help but mutter under her depression. If Lord Noah is disappointed in Nasaric because of this and leaves this place, before she could finish her sentence, Xiaotaya's delicate body trembled violently as if she couldn't imagine such an outcome. She shook her head desperately. No. That can't be. That can't happen. Lord Noah is the most benevolent supreme ruler in this world. A benevolent king who can even save inferior creatures like humans. He definitely won't abandon us. It was as if Xiaotaya had deliberately said these words to convince herself. However, this sentence made the uneasiness in Xiaotaya's heart even more intense, making her footsteps even heavier. She walked forward with an ashen expression. As time passed, no matter how heavy Xiaotaya's footsteps were, she still arrived at the door of Noah's room. To Xiaotaya's surprise, there were two figures in front of the door. Yerbade and Demiurgos. As if noticing Xiaotaya's arrival, Yair and Demiyugos focused their gazes on her at the same time. At that moment, Xiaotaya didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Yair and Demiyugos' gazes were full of blame. This made Xiaotaya, who was already very uneasy, panic. You! Why are you here? Yair and Demiyugos fell silent at the same time. Then, Demiyugos spoke up. We came to report to Lord Noah because the results of the research on the maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasariq have come out. The maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasariq used to be the gold coins in Yggdrasil. Now, there was no longer a channel to obtain the gold coins in Yggdrasil. The underground tomb in Nasariq had to confirm whether the money in this world could be used for maintenance costs. This result was enough to affect the future development of the underground tomb in Nasariq. Compared to Yair and Demiyugos, who were running around for this important matter, Xiaotaya, who had been controlled by the enemy and brought trouble to Noah, was simply too incompetent. Xiaotaya lowered her head guiltily. At that moment, Yair spoke. Since you're here, let's go in together. Xiaotaya could only nod. Chapter 1235. Katja, with the sound of the door opening, Yair Demiyugos, and the restless Satya entered Noah's room together. The luxurious suite was presented in front of the three guardians of Nasariq's underground tomb, causing a trace of solemnity to rise in the hearts of the three guardians. Coming to the residence of the supreme ruler of Nasariq's underground tomb, no NPC would not feel solemn. Even Xiaotaya, who was feeling extremely uneasy, was the same. Even Demiyugos subconsciously lowered his voice. It seems that Lord Noah is still resting for the time being. In the underground tomb of Nasariq, all the creatures were of the xenomorph type. These xenomorph creatures almost never tired, didn't need to eat, and didn't need to rest or sleep at all. Therefore, xenomorph creatures were very troublesome to deal with for humans. For example, if humans and the undead were to go to war, then the undead's advantage would be simply unimaginable. Can you imagine, when you are exhausted from fighting on the battlefield, the lowest level skeleton is still waving its sword vigorously from start to finish? Can you imagine, when you haven't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, when you're really sleepy, the lowest level skeleton is still charging? Can you imagine, when your body urgently needs to replenish its food and recover its physical strength, the scene of the lowest level skeleton still relentlessly launching attacks? For humans, fatigue, sleep, and food were indispensable. However, the lowly undead didn't have such problems. Therefore, if humans and the undead were to go to war, the undead army could continuously fight a war of attrition. As long as they fought for 7 days and 7 nights without stopping, then no matter how large the human army was, it would be finished. Moreover, the human army needed food, but the undead army didn't. They could wait until the human army ran out of food, then the humans would be finished. In view of this, in the eyes of the undead, and even in the eyes of other races, humans who had no special abilities, were born with extremely low physical conditions, and had all kinds of needs were inferior creatures. Because the human race was too troublesome and too fragile, wasn't it? That's what everyone in the great tombs of Nasariq was thinking. Only Noah was an exception. To be more precise, in the eyes of everyone in the underground tomb of Nasariq, humans were reduced to inferior existences because of the need to rest. But when it came to Noah, they were instantly glorified. Ah! Ah ah ah! Yair clenched his hands tightly in front of him as if his heart was aching. He's actually still resting now. This must be the result of Lord Noah working so hard for the matter of Nasariq, right? We, the benevolent and merciful supreme beings, have worked too hard. Demiyugos lowered his head guiltily. If we could be more useful and help share Lord Noah's burden, Lord Noah wouldn't have to work. Demiyugos lowered his head and said. According to the time on the surface, it should be around 7 o'clock in the morning. Is that so? Noah patted his cheeks and forced himself to wake up. Then, let's talk inside. After that, Noah walked directly to the inner office, opened the door, and walked in. Yayarbade, Satya, and Dimiyagos looked at each other, stood up, and walked into the office with Noah. In the luxurious office, as soon as Noah sat on the black leather chair, Yayarbade immediately stepped forward. Lord Noah, regarding the issue of the maintenance cost of the Nasaric underground tomb, we have already come to a conclusion. Is that so? Noah nodded and said. But, let's talk about this later. Yayarbade was slightly startled, then immediately understood what Noah meant. Under such circumstances, Noah turned his head and cast his gaze on Satya. Satya. Yes. Satya probably didn't expect to be called so suddenly. Her shoulders trembled violently, and her voice was abnormally loud. I'm here. At that moment, Satya's heart was filled with an extremely strong sense of uneasiness. Before discussing the important issue related to the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Noah chose to talk to Satya first. Does that mean that compared to the most important issue of the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Satya's betrayal is more serious? When she thought of this, Satya could not hide her uneasiness. However, the next moment, Noah said such a sentence. There shouldn't be any problems with your body, right? Such a sentence made Satya, who thought she would be reprimanded, stunned at first. Then, a look of guilt appeared on her face. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.